One of my sisters the other day, around like November 1st, which I guess I wasn't ready for November 1st, or I had my mind set on something entirely different. Uh, because my sister contacted me around November 1st and was like, hey, by the way, I'm already doing Christmas shopping, or I already want to start Christmas shopping. So if just make sure like your wish list or whatever is up to date. And I said to her, just give me a second, because as much as I tell myself like, hey, this is eventually going to happen. You're going to eventually get asked for your wish list. So if you want something, just like look it up and put it on your wish list, and then when the time comes, you can take it off if you really don't want it. Um, I never do that. um, but I looked at my wish list. I'm not gonna tell you everything that's on my wish list, but one of the things that I have on there are two books, two collections by Junji Ito, the famous mangaka, horror mangaka, and he's I think my favorite mangaka, honestly. And I don't like a lot of mangaka, and I don't really read manga, so it's not like that's a hard role to fill. But the two books I have on there are the collection of Gyo and the collection of Uzumaki, which are, of course, two of his most famous pieces. The only other collection I think they had there was Tomie, and I'm not the biggest fan of the Tomie collection. Truly and honestly, I'm just not. It's not like it's my least favorite stories he's ever written. But I do think someone like Junji Ito really thrives when it comes to short stories or small stories that make you question your existence. Um, it's not like I hate all of his long form stories, but I just I usually get affected more by his shorter stories than I do by his longer narratives. Um, I know everybody knows like the Enigma of Amigara Fault. Everybody knows that one. Most people know something about Tomie, at least a little bit. Um, but one of my favorite of his longer form pieces that I've actually read all the way through, I purposefully did not look too much into Uzumaki or Gyo, specifically because those were collections that I was looking for, and I wanted to have the physical books in my hands before I actually started reading it. Um, but one of my favorites of his longer form stories is a collection known as Hellstar Remina. I highly recommend it as something to read because it is, again, it's like I said, one of my favorite of his longer form stories. And there is something to be said about uh, the story itself, the fear of the apocalypse, um, and the fear of just like this nightmare entity coming to destroy humanity and humanity trying to fight for its survival. Um, and I think there is something to be said about the idea that the truly terrifying part of that story are the humans and not the voracious entity. As like art school literary genius thing that sounds like, oh, the true monster are the humans, but there is something to be said about that. People get freaked out by different things in different ways, but I think the thing that truly freaks me out is uh the fear of that happening. uh I guess, because here's the thing about Hellstar Remina. Basically, the story revolves around a girl named Remina whose father found a new planet a few like solar systems away, or a few galaxies away. They found a new planet, and he decided to name it Remina. Come to find out, after his daughter, and because of this, she gained a lot of popularity from it. Popularity she didn't want, and she kind of got thrust into the eye of the world. Come to find out that planet Remina is a galaxy eating monster. And basically, like, apocalypse, there's a lot of shit. I don't want to give too much away just because, again, it's one of my favorite of Junji Ito's long form stories. So I highly recommend anyone to go and watch it. Or watch it, read it. I'm stuck on TV shows for some reason. Uh, but I think there's something to be said about the fear of, oh, will that ever happen? Of course not. It's not something that, like, there's no living creature out there that's a fucking giant planet that eats galaxies, you know? But I think there's something to be said about the fear of, like, if you were to put yourself in this situation, would you do the exact same thing that the depraved people of humanity did? And, thinking about it, I was like, maybe, maybe not for myself, but I don't know what it is I would do. I don't know if, like, the first sign of uh, force or stress, I'd be dead in some sort of way. Um, because there are a lot of people who did it for their own selfish gain, what they did in Hellstar Remina, but most of the people that were there weren't doing it because of Remina herself. They were doing it because they feared for their own livelihood. It wasn't necessarily that they had a vendetta against Remina. It was that they wanted so badly to survive that they were able to believe something so crazy. And the visuals of that story, like, again, I don't want to give away, like, spoilers or anything, but there is at one point the world kind of, like, how do I describe it without spoiling what happens? The physical world, not just like the world as in the humans, but the physical world starts going crazy. And the visuals of just that happening are insane. And they feel insane to read about. It really does feel like you're in this place at this point. I think it's interesting to talk about stories that specifically either freak me out or not necessarily freak me out, the stories that disturb me and why they disturb me. Um, for someone like Junji Ito, I would say the stories that I've read so far, because I've not read his entire, like, it's not iconography, but I don't know what to call it. But I haven't read all the stories that he's ever written, and I don't pretend to know, like, every story he's ever written. But there are a lot of his more famous stories that it's not that I don't find them scary, is that I don't find them as disturbing as I think other people do. One of them is Head Balloons, if you guys know that story. Um, it is very scary, but I don't know if I was sitting there after I read it, pondering, like, about the situation that they were in. Like, yes, there was the overall feeling of hopelessness and all that, um, and the ending was very, very clever. But again, I don't know if I felt like it moved me in a way that I was thinking about it for a long, long time. Um, the few stories that were able to do that, one of them I talked about recently, very shortly in a post that I made, um, and that was Red Turtleneck, um, which the basis of the story, as vague as I can be, is decapitation, but almost. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, that story is truly disturbing. At least it highly disturbed me, and I'm someone who draws gore art on a daily basis. Like, I did a whole thing for Goretober. But it was one of the stories that truly disturbed me. Not necessarily for the gore factor, for the dark, like, blood and stuff like that. Here's the thing about Junji Ito. His blood and his body horror and all that, they're definitely an add-on, but I don't think they're the main reason I often feel disturbed by his works. And the thing about Red Turtleneck that I felt disturbed me the most was the situation the character found himself in. Not necessarily that he was bleeding out and in pain, but he was in intense pain, intense stress, and to the point that at one point he said his hands were going numb. And just the feeling of doing that for so long and how that affected him afterwards. Um, it kind of that feeling of like uh it's just never ending, the never ending stress, the never ending pain, you know what I mean? I think that's what mostly freaks me out about this story. Oh yeah, the Enigma of Amigara Fault, the one with the holes in the mountain. That one is also freaky. I would say that is one of the more popular ones that actually did freak me out. I don't know, it's because of some hidden claustrophobia, or if it's just the I think someone described it as the fear of what's it called? The fear of shit, I don't remember what it was called. um the fear of like not being able to control yourself, something like that. That one scared the life out of me. Yeah, honestly, yes, it did scare me a lot when I first read it. Um, Not that it doesn't scare me now, not like, oh, I'm totally over it or anything, but first readings are best readings. Another one that kind of freaked me out in a weird way, not for the reason I think it would normally freak people out, was one of his stories called Dissection Girl. And the reason it freaked me out was because it had a lot of sexual tones to it and a lot of like references to like fetish, and along with all of the like disturbing thoughts and like gore and body horror hidden underneath it. And if you guys know anything about me, you know I don't like that stuff. I don't like when people ascribe a sexual tension to gore. People call it eroguro, or erotic gore, and I'm not a fan personally. Yes, I do draw gore art, but I'm not a fan of like eroticism in gore. So that just kind of made me uncomfortable in a specific way. Oh, Slug Girl. That's another one. Yes, I am. This is my main persona that I use as a waiting image for my stream. I'm redrawing it because it's been a few years since I drew it. It doesn't look anything like me, by the way. I just want to reiterate, don't look like it. I don't know how people can draw themselves as their personas. I like look at myself for 5 seconds and I'm like, I'm fucking tired of looking at myself. I want to draw something else. Every artist I think has like a quote unquote persona that kind of just does not look like them, even though it's supposed to be them. There's nothing bad about that. I don't really ascribe like any bad notions like, oh, you don't know how you actually look. Because I think people look different to everybody. Like, the way you view yourself is not always going to be the way someone else views you. I'm talking physically, not really like emotionally, mentally, things like that. But, from someone else's perspective, they don't really see everything you're seeing. And from your perspective, you can't always see what they're seeing. Which is a bad thing when you put relationships into the mix, and then you don't have a good self-image, but someone else has a good self-image of you, so you kind of become dependent on their love and care. You know what? I'm not gonna get into it. Yes, sweaters and short hair are the deal. They are the best. I want to cut my hair again, but I don't want to go to the barber right now. As weird as it sounds, I don't want to go to the barber right now. I'll buy a razor and I'll shave it off myself. I swear. I think for me personally, I like jackets. Uh, and I do have a lot of jackets, but I never have the jacket specifically that I want. And they're usually like these really highfalutin like designer jackets that I like. Um, so I kind of wear like really plain looking clothes normally. So whenever I like want to draw like, oh, what I wish I looked like, I give myself like these designer kind of things. It's not about the money, it's about the clothes. There was this interesting conversation I was having with myself the other day. Um, that sounds so sad. But I have to have conversations with myself because if not, I'm gonna go stir crazy. um, but I was having a conversation with myself, trying to understand something. Um, and if you don't know, like I said before, I draw a lot of gore art. I am kind of like one of those artists that do a lot of that dark, moody stuff. Which is why I've permanently made this channel a mature channel. Um, but one thing I think people sometimes misconstrue is the idea that if you do dark stuff, you don't have a limit to what it is you're willing to do or what it is you're willing to look at. And for me, I do definitely 100% have a pretty big limit on certain things. When it comes to super super violent stuff, I would say my limits are some of the like more out there type movies where they've been banned in certain countries, like things like Cannibal Holocaust and stuff like that, or really anything having to do with cannibals now that I think about it. But I don't like that stuff. I it's not a fan. But another type of like I guess story or movie or something to that effect that always freaks me out. Not necessarily for the movie itself or like the execution of the movie, because they're usually not great movies, but just the idea of the movie, I guess. And that's experimentation horror movies. And what I mean by that are like not experimental, experimentation. Like the Human Centipede and a movie like Tusk. Both of those movies aren't great movies. Like I know the Human Centipede has a huge cult following, but it's not really that great of a movie. Um, kind of like Teeth. It was not that great of a movie either, but it has a cult following for some reason. But I get so I don't know what it is. I get so squicked out, I suppose, when when I see those concepts put into effect. Again, it's like one of those things that's like taking away control and morphing someone into something truly disgusting. The Human Centipede. But the thing, like, you obviously know the Human Centipede, but the Tusk, it was just called Tusk. When I first saw trailers for it, I was deeply disturbed. And I only saw the trailers. I've like maybe seen like one or two scenes from the actual movie, but I haven't actually watched it. But essentially, what it is this like doctor, scientist, whatever guy wants to experiment on this dude and turn him into a walrus. Now, from what I've heard, the director of the movie is apparently one of those directors that mixes like dark comedy, like horror and comedy and stuff like that. So the movie was like weirdly funny at points. But still, I just the, there's something kind of like very disturbing about like transforming a human into something that they're not supposed to be, and like the utter terror you would feel from like this weird mixing, like you're somehow still alive but you're not the way you're supposed to be, if you know what I mean. It's hard to describe, but it's like again it's like taking power away from you, taking control away from you, which I guess is one of my biggest fears. It's why I'm not gonna say it. You know what? I'm not gonna say that last sentence because it's gonna go back in my mouth. Uh, we're gonna leave it at that. But you know, it's just I guess it's one of my biggest fears. I don't know if that makes sense, but oh, you've seen a pic of the walrus man. Yeah, He's not fun to look at. I wouldn't say he's particularly disturbing, but he's kind of ugly. It's not necessarily like the human centipede, where the people still looked like themselves, but they were tied together, you know? Oh. And I remember the first time I heard about the human centipede, the movie, not the actual, like, image of or anything. Um, it was from friends in high school who were just talking about it because they were like, "Oh, it's so fucking weird, dude. It's like they like mix these people all together," and it's like, high schoolers, like, super edgy and all that. They just uh, want to look at the weirdest shit that they can. Um, but I remember hearing about it and not looking it up. I didn't look it up at the time, but I remember hearing about it and thinking, when I thought centipede, I thought these people were morphed to look like a centipede. Like they were bloated in some sort of way, they had like slime covering them in some sort of way. That was my thought when I heard human centipede. When I found out it was actually people just kind of like strung together, I was like, oh, that's not that disturbing. Okay, but me over here with an experiment comic. Well, are you morphing them into something they're not supposed to be? Okay, truth be told, I do have an experiment story of my own. Uh, and that's with a Creed and Din's story. I don't know if I want to talk about this because it's kind of spoilery, but I think I'll talk about it just so it makes sense of why I have an experiment comic. Or not comic, a story. One of the stories in Din and Creed's story, like an extra story, is that there are two people who, one of um, the characters are supposed to be in love, sort of, but one of the characters doesn't feel right loving the other character because he doesn't look right. This character had a vision of the person that he was supposed to love, and this was not that person, even though he sort of looked like him. And the other character is kind of like, they're upset because they feel like this other person kind of looks like the person that they're supposed to love too, but they won't love them back because they don't look exactly right. So they basically willingly set themselves up as a patient of their experiments to try and look right. And so it kind of becomes this push and pull, like double-sided abusive story kind of thing. That's as vague as I can be without like revealing everything that goes on in the story. But I think I kind of did that because I was kind of it's not necessarily experimentation that makes someone into a walrus, but again, I would emphasize it's just morphing them into something they're not supposed to be. But but it's just I think the reason I did that, the reason I wanted to explore that part of my psyche, was kind of because I wondered if like there are a lot of stories of like I've heard of like relationships that start out on a very very bad rut, or people who get these really bad DMs after they had their first date with someone who is like, oh, if you change this about yourself, I'll date you again, but not until then, kind of thing. And I wondered how far can I take that kind of relationship to where these people are effectively destroying each other, and then make it so that maybe once they get separated, they can try to move on with their lives and try to better themselves. Um, I don't know. It's just the whole theme of Din and Creed's story is the idea that after moving on from trauma, can you still better yourself? And guilt and shame and things like that. The way you said walrus. My dreams are either stories like movies or I'm being chased by mysterious people with guns and they always find me. Oh my god. Jesus. Do you want to be in like an action film? Is that your ultimate dream? It's not a fun thing to do in real life. Certainly not. Something looks wrong. No thanks. I had like one dream where I got shot. Um, and I was very confused because it didn't hurt. I didn't understand why it didn't hurt. It just didn't. At the time, I didn't understand why it didn't hurt, but then I woke up, realized it was a dream, and I'm like, oh, it didn't hurt because I was dreaming. But I was freaking out. It was kind of like a silent panic because I was like, holy shit, I just got fucking shot. I don't remember the context of me getting shot. I just remember that after I got shot, me, one of my sisters, and my father went to a hotel. And it wasn't like a seedy like motel thing where oh we're trying to hide out from the criminals or whatever. No, it was like a super fancy hotel. And while we were waiting at the registration desk, uh, the guy who shot me just walked up next to us and like put the gun on the counter. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then I woke up. So that's a thing that happened. I always feel pain in my dreams. It's not fun. I think no, I can't really remember a time that I've specifically felt pain in my dream. I can remember times where I panicked really, really badly, to the point where I'd do the Hollywood thing where I'd wake up and I'd like shoot out of the bed and I'd be like hyperventilating, um, which is not a thing people normally do. By the way, it's a Hollywood thing. Nope. But yeah, I think there was one time where I woke up from a dream. I think it might have been a nightmare because I was feeling very stressed out. And I just kind of laid in bed for a while. Um, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, my heart starts racing. I legit think I'm like having a fucking heart attack because my heart just starts racing out of nowhere. And it gets to the point where I actually have to, like, I'm already awake, but I have to shoot up from my bed and I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? Like, I have to slow down my breathing. I have to take a second because I'm like, what the fuck is happening? It's never happened since. And this was like 2 years ago, I think. It's never happened since, but it was like the scariest feeling because I knew I was awake, so it's not like I could say, "Oh, I woke up from a dream and my heart was racing" or anything. It was like I was already awake from said dream. It took me a while to calm down. I don't know what the fuck happened. I think I might have just had like a small like little panic attack or something. I've been feeling pain in dreams since like seventh grade. I was like shot in the head and it was awful. I've never panicked though, unless I had something anxiety-inducing the next day. That's not cool. I I don't like my dreams on normal days. Number one, I don't dream a lot, or at least I don't remember most of the dreams that I have. But number two, most of the dreams I have are kind of terrifying. um, but I the idea of getting hurt in your dream and just like having it something you can't really wake up from, it's like I don't know that just makes me panic. And again, I haven't been sleeping well, so. But oh, have you ever had stress dreams? They're the worst. Oh my god. I think the worst amount of time that I've had stress dreams was actually when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I used to be a theater major, so when I was in high school, I was a theater major, and I would have stress dreams about the day of the production, and I would show up to the production. I wouldn't know my lines, I wouldn't know my blocking, I wouldn't know anything. It was like I just got there. And I haven't had those dreams in years. And like I think last year I had one of those dreams. It was like I was back in high school. I had one of those dreams and I could not stand it. I was like, this is the worst fucking thing to just pop out of nowhere again. I hate it. Oh god. Closing shifts by themselves are just like they freak me out. The idea freaks me out of just like closing the store on your own kind of thing. Or I don't know if you're on your own, but just like closing up the store, you know. But the idea that they never end, holy shit. That made me that made me like get itchy feeling on my body. Oh, this might be like a little thing to try and like lighten the mood, but I have not successfully slept the night before Christmas in like 10 years. I don't know what it is. I don't really get all that excited about Christmas anymore. Especially since the Christmas, I think 2 or 3 years ago at this point. I think it was 2 years ago. It wasn't last year, I know that much. But I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. Ever since that Christmas, definitely don't get excited about Christmas anymore. Um, but I guess I stress out about Christmas. Um, I think it might have to do with the fact that on Christmas we visit my sister, and so we have to get up really early and then get going. And something about being on the road with my whole family stresses me out. And it's not like they're super loud or they're annoying or anything. It just stresses me out because I don't know why it stresses me out. It just stresses me out. My family stresses me out, okay? Me either. I'm always so hyped for the next day just because of the feeling. Hey, still got that hype feeling? Good for you. Good for you. I mean, Christmas is also my birthday, so you think I'd be doubly excited. But fuck no. I love how every time I tell someone, it's like, oh, when's your birthday? It's like, oh, it's on Christmas. And they're like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, fuck you, man. You don't get to read me like that. When I was smaller, I did appreciate my birthday being on Christmas a little bit more, just because I heard from some of my friends back in school that some of their parents couldn't be there for their birthday because they had to work. And at least for me, I knew majority of my family could be there during my birthday because it was on Christmas, and Christmas is usually a day where people get off work, except for my mother. When my mother was working a certain job, Christmas was a blackout day, and so she needed to go into work. I think it was at some kind of call center. I forget exactly where. But she doesn't anymore. She doesn't do that anymore. So it's good. Oh, God, my younger self feels like such a lifetime away. I know I'm only 23, but my younger self feels like it's so far away. I don't know. There were certain things that my younger self experienced that I don't experience anymore, and it feels really weird. Like I remember the time that my mother was home most of the day. Um, like my younger self, my mother was like always working at night, and so she was sleeping during the day. But then there was a time when she got a different job that made it so she was home all day, and that felt really weird for a while because I was not used to it. Eventually, I did get used to it, but it was like for the first I think few years that happened, I was just like it still boggled my mind that she was home. I don't know. My father was never like that. He was always working 2, 3 jobs, you know. I also remember when I was very young, I thought people who lived in two-story houses were rich. Because to me, because I was so small, not that I've grown a lot since then, but since I was so small, I used to think two-story houses were like mansions. And so every time I saw someone who like lived in a two-story house, I'm like, wow, your parents must have a lot of money. I never told them that, and even when I told my mother that, she was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah," because she couldn't really believe it, because clearly not. And then my family got a two-story house, and I fucking hated it. I hated it so much. I told my mother just recently, like I think either last month or the month before, because we were just talking about it, and I told her like, "Oh yeah, I hated that house," and she was like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yes, I made my disdain for that house pretty fucking clear." And she was like, "I never knew," and I'm like, "How? How did you never know?" Like, how long were we there? Like the 3 years or something that we were there. I never made it not known that I did not like the house. And it wasn't just the house itself. It wasn't like, oh, the house didn't have enough amenities or stuff like that. It was just everything that went down in that house was not a good time. I do not have good memories of that house. Like 10 different ways. Yeah. I think there should be. I think if you look back at yourself and maybe you like, ooh, cringe at little things you do, I think that's progress. Not to say that you should be mean to your younger self, even though your younger self technically doesn't exist anymore. But I think if you understand that some of the things you did were like cringeworthy or they were really bad in some sort of way, I think that's a growth, and I think that's a good thing to like look back on yourself. And if you are nostalgic about certain things, just think about it for a second. Unless you're one of those people who, like Thomas Sanders says, is a habitual warrior, where looking back on it can actually make you sadder. Um, don't do that. There was a time in my life where that was very prominent, where being nostalgic for certain things made me sad because I realized those times were long gone. Luckily, I don't have that at the moment. Luckily, that's not my current state of affairs in my head right now. So I do feel like I've moved past that sort of feeling. But that was rough. It was rough to just not be able to think about anything I've done ever in my life and feel any sort of way about it without feeling sad about it. What are your thoughts on superheroes and superhero movie and stuff? It's not my cup of tea personally. I don't really like watching superhero movies, and I don't really read comics all that much. I've watched maybe like two or three superhero movies. I originally watched The Dark Knight when it first came out, but because my brother and sister wanted to watch it, I watched Deadpool when it came out, but because my friends wanted to watch it, and I watched Iron Man 2 a long time after it came out, because I needed to watch it for a class I was taking. So I never really watched superhero movies of my own fruition. It's always kind of someone encouraging me to go watch it. But it's not really my thing personally. One of my friends scolded me because I watched the second Iron Man movie, and I was like, "What am I supposed to do? I had to watch it for class." And he was like, "No, you have to watch the first one." And I'm like, "Fuck you." Yeah, that's understandable. He actually asked me at one point if I wanted to go see, what was it, Infinity War, and I'm like, I've never seen a single like movie from any of these characters. Why are you asking me if I want to see Infinity War? You know I don't watch superhero movies. Like I made that pretty abundant in our friendship. And he was like, "But it's Infinity War. It's like you have to see it. It's not just a superhero movie." And I'm like, "Dude, no. Unless you want me turning over to you every 5 seconds asking who's that? What's going on? Where are they going? What are they doing? You don't want me in that theater with you." And from what I heard, Infinity War was a really big thing for a lot of people. So I was like, I was not going to be in there tainting it with my non knowledge of superhero movies. Okay, dude. No worries. I think I'm just going to finish the hair and then finish the tail, and I think I'll be done for today. But thanks for sticking by. You go get some rest. Okay, I think I'm done for today. I'll try to stream more this weekend. Um, Hopefully, I'll have more time, especially since I did the test today for my Western class. So hopefully, I'll have more time to stream this weekend. I'll try to stream like some Final Fantasy IX and drawing at the same time. So if you like either one, stay tuned for that. But until then, I gotta go. It is also 2:30 a.m. for me, so I gotta go. And I'll see you all next time.